Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Ben Marcus, and welcome to another live show with OM System. Today, I am so thrilled to be joined by one of our newest ambassadors in North America. Her name's Cari Siebrits. I'm super excited for you guys to get to know her, as well as take a look at some of her absolutely fabulous wildlife photography. As always, give us a like, give us a follow, give us a subscribe, share us with your friends. We appreciate and love it all. Let's keep building that community because, after all, it is World Photography Day. So, Cari, a little bit about her before we bring her on. Cari has been somebody that I've had the pleasure to work with for over a year. She's been partnered with us on multiple projects, and I was so thrilled to have the honor to bring her on as an ambassador for North America this year. Cari hails from Vancouver. Absolutely warm, bubbly human being, but you're going to really get attached to how passionate she is about finding unique ways to highlight wildlife photography, but also promoting the conservation for both big and small. So without further ado, let's get into it and look at how your photography can go from good to great when it comes to wildlife. Cari, welcome.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. That was such a lovely introduction,
Oh,
Ben.
thanks.
And happy
Thank you.
World Photography Day, everybody. I honestly can't think of anywhere I'd rather be right now than with a bunch of like-minded folks geeking out over wildlife and cameras. That seems like the dream day for me.
Right? Right. Getting to talk about something you love, of course, but on its day to celebrate. So we've got a lot of people that are messaging in. I just always love giving shout outs to a few that I'm always surprised. But first off, we got some folks from Philly. We've got people from England. We've got somebody from Loveland, Colorado. Very interesting place, super exciting. We have an Overland Expo that me and a couple other people from Own System are going to be at starting on Friday. So if you're there through the weekend, definitely come to the Overland Expo in Loveland. But we've got a bunch of folks from New Jersey, Cripple Creek, Wilmington, North Carolina, a lot of people from the UK, got a couple people north of Seattle, Fredericksburg. Very cool. So as you guys have questions, let us know in the comments below. We'll be taking a look at those throughout, and we'll also have a little bit of a Q&A after this, so stick around. But yeah, Cari, let's bring up this really beautiful slide deck that you have.
I'm still just looking at the chat. I see so many places I want to visit. Send me your invites anytime. But thank you all so much for joining. I have a lot of slides to get through and a lot I want to talk to you all about today, so I'm going to get right into it. Just so you have a lay of the land and of what we're covering in the next hour together, I'll give an additional really quick intro. I can't compete with that. That was amazing. But I'll share some other things I think you should know about me if you're spending the next hour with me. I'll share what I'm shooting with, which I'm so excited about. And then we'll really get into the good stuff. I'm going to share about how really finding extraordinary moments close to home has helped me level up my wildlife photography, about scanning our scenes and finding our shots within the scene, about choosing that moment to press our shutter, about our angles and perspectives, about our backgrounds and light. And I'm not going to get into settings too much today, but at the end, I'm going to share some of the things that helped me transition from someone who was shooting mostly in auto to a full manual. And because I'm a mean presenter, I am giving you homework at the end. So you will be getting some field assignments from me.
That's a first. I love it.
Sorry, everybody.
It's good homework, though, guys.
It's going to be fun. A little bit about me. My name is Cari. It's a weird name, so I always say it rhymes with safari, and people seem to remember it that way. I am based in coastal British Columbia in Canada. And I am really in it, I think, for probably the same reason all of you are. I'm in it for the animals. I was that kid at birthday parties that was sitting in the corner with the family dog. As much as I was playing with the other kids at house parties and dinner parties, I'm still doing that a lot of the times. And wildlife has just taught me so much about patience, about presence, about resilience, about connection, about who I am. And I'm really in it for my subjects. I try to showcase that in my work and also try to support conservation and coexistence initiatives as much as I can. But I think the most important thing you should all know about me is I have made a lot of mistakes. I will continue to make a lot of mistakes. And as someone who sort of picked up her camera, didn't know very much about my camera, didn't know much about the genre, I've learned a lot of lessons along the way, and they're very fresh still. So today I'm really going to try to share some of the things I've learned, the things that went really well, the things that didn't. So that's what we're in for. But on the note of things that are going exceptionally well, is my gear. As Ben mentioned, I am a new OM ambassador. It is one of the biggest honors of my life so far. And I fully switched over to OM about a year and a half ago. And since that switch, it has leveled up my photography in so many ways, not only in terms of the quality of the images I'm capturing, which it absolutely has, but really in the way I've reimagined what I can capture. And I felt creative in a new way because I'm able to shoot in conditions I was never able to before. I am able to bring my camera along with me way more than I ever was before. I am someone who should be doing more arm day in the gym because like holding a big telephoto up for a really long time can be difficult for me. But with the image stabilization, I am getting handheld videos out in the field. So my go-to setup is that combo you see on the left. It's the OM1 Mark II paired with the 150 to 400 millimeter lens. And I think any of us that are out there sort of shooting wildlife know we want something that we can bring with us, and we want something that guarantees that reach and that quality when we need it. And this combo is really doing that for me. Also, I've heard so many people who shoot OM talk about weather sealing over the years. I always wondered, how big of a deal is that? And maybe don't listen to this next part, but I have put this camera through the ringer. I have been shooting in atmospheric rivers where my rain jacket and rain pants are soaked through, but the camera is still going. I have been shooting on windy, sandy beaches from choppy salt water, and I can really count on my gear. I have full confidence that it is going to be able to deliver in that moment. The other camera I'm shooting with, I like to think of this as my little adventure buddy, is the OM5. And I've got a telephoto, I've got the 100 to 400 and also a 12 to 45 millimeter lens that I really love. This is when I'm really thinking about weight. So if I am going on a camping trip and I am worried about how much I'm carrying out into the wilderness, or if I'm kayaking, or if I'm doing a really big hike, this is sort of what I grab. Also take it with on family vacations. And I've gotten some really cool shots that are in this presentation with that setup as well. The quality is still great. It's a little bit lighter weight, so I can bring it along with me. Oh, and I can't hear you.
Gotta love that. It is a live show, people. So first question, when do you use the 150 to 400 versus the 100 to 400? I mean, of course, weight and size are certainly a consideration. You had the 100 to 400 first. I feel like it's not coming out as much, but are there reasons that you'll still pull it out versus the big white, as people like to say?
The big white is my go-to when I'm specifically focused on wildlife, but I do love the 100 to 400. Like I said, when the weight is a really big factor. I just did a really big, long, like 15K hike straight up a mountain, and that is the lens I would bring along on that hike in case I see a bear or something out there, just because of that weight factor. But my go-to usually is the 150 to 400. Okay, now before we get into the good stuff, I want you all to use your imagination with me just for a second. I want you to picture that I have this super special machine where I can teleport all of us who are on this call from all of these different places around the world. And I can take us all to the exact same scene. And let's just say we're all going to grab our cameras before I teleport you. And we are going to Banff National Park in the Alberta Rockies. I'm going to say it's a snowy day because it's been really warm here. So we've got some fresh snowfall, and we are all looking at the exact same subject. Let's say it's a red fox for my scenario. So I've teleported us all here. We all get to take one shot of this fox. How many identical photos do you think we're going to walk away with? I would argue we're not going to have any identical photos. We might have some that are similar, but we're all going to bring a different perspective, a different angle. Some of us are going to lock right in on that fox's face. Some of us might see the way, the light hits its ears. Some of us might zoom out and get an environmental shot. So I think it is just magic that all of us could be looking at the exact same animal at the exact same scene and all walk away with an entirely different image. And if there's one thing I hope you take away from today, it's that every single photo you take is such a unique reflection of you. You are the something special that you're bringing to it. It's a reflection of how you feel in the moment, of how you see the world. And I think in the age of social media, especially, it can be so easy to compare our photos to everybody else's. But this is the thing I want you to remember. You're adding the special piece to it. I'm just seeing some sound issues. Is my sound okay?
Yeah, I'm a little curious. Is that me or is that you? Well, we'll find out. But hey,
Keep us posted. I hope you can hear me.
yeah, constructive feedback is always good.
So on this note of, okay, I'm glad the sound is okay for some of us. I hope it is for everybody. But on that note of how, all of us are going to capture this fox differently. If you're thinking, Cari, that's a really lovely sentiment, but prove it. Here is my proof. These photos were taken in Yellowstone a couple of years ago. And you can see we were all in the same scene. We are all looking at the exact same bison. And 4 photographers walked away with 4 very different shots. That photo on the top left, I think, is a photographer that needs no introduction in this room, Brooke Bartleson at Brooke Little Bear. Amazing human guide, photographer, and storyteller. And you can see Brooke on the top left, and Barry Roberts, who's a British-based photographer, Barry.the.Brit, the best Instagram handle ever. But Brooke and Barry really sort of leaned into the power and the resilience of this bison. They got a little bit of motion. It feels really harsh, and this bison just looks like a survivor in their photos. Meanwhile, if you look at the bottom left is a US-based photographer, Sarah Calloway, of Moons and Creatures. All amazing photographers you should follow if you're not already. But Sarah and I were captivated by this tree in the background. I remember seeing it, and it looked so spindly, and it looked so harsh and wintry. And that's what really drew our attention. And even then, we both captured it in slightly different ways. So this is just another example of we're all bringing something really special nobody else can bring to our shots. And on that note of special, I think the biggest thing that really helped me go from a beginner to really leveling up my photography was finding extraordinary moments in sort of the ordinary subjects, ordinary moments, finding that close to home. Because I think it's so easy when we think about wildlife photography to think about, the big megafauna. We think about the moose, the grizzlies, the wolves. And those are amazing. I've never had a bad time with any of these subjects, but realistically, we're not all living among, moose and grizzlies and wolves all of the time. And some of the images I love the most, and some of the encounters I remember the most, have been close to home, have been the subjects that are literally in my own backyard, and really challenged me to sort of be creative in new ways. And you might think, Cari, you live on, the West Coast, you get temperate rainforests and beaches and mountains. Of course, it's easy for you to say, shoot close to home. And this is where I live now. But when I started my wildlife photography career, I was living in Toronto, in Canada's largest, densest, most populous city. I was specifically living in that very unaesthetically pleasing apartment building in the top left. I was on the 14th floor, and that is where I picked up my camera one day and decided I was going to walk to the local park 10 minutes from my apartment and see if I could find any wildlife in the city. And boy, did I ever. It really taught me how much wilderness there is still all around us, even in our biggest, densest cities. If we really look and pay attention, it's more of a mindset shift. We can find so much out there. And there's so many benefits to looking close to home. It's accessible. It doesn't have to be a big, expensive trip and you're taking a lot of vacation time and planning. It's something where you can walk outside of your house and look around and see what's around you, which also gives us an opportunity to practice so much more. And the more we practice, the quicker we're going to grow and develop our skills. And it gives us space to build our creativity and confidence. It takes some of the pressure off if we are taking a photo of our neighborhood deer that we see once a week versus if we are, going to Churchill to see the polar bears. It might feel like a lot of pressure if that's sort of your one moment. This gives us an opportunity to practice our skills, to experiment with new settings, new compositions, and have some of that pressure off of us, which I think makes us a little bit more creative and more ready for those big moments. Another really big benefit is wildlife in urban and semi-urban areas tend to be so much more tolerant of us. They are living in our human world and so used to us that if I'd seen this white-tailed deer out in the backcountry in Ontario, it might have taken one look at me, taken off into the bush, and I never would have seen it again. Versus this deer that will go about its day and let me sort of position myself and get my shot. And lastly, and I think this is the most important, every day becomes an adventure when you look at your home this way. I met this birder from Germany years ago, and I remember he told me he lived in Berlin. And every single day he left his house to go to work since he started birding, it felt like he was on a safari. And I thought that was the most beautiful sentiment and something we can really bring into sort of our day-to-day lives when we're picking up our cameras and focusing on wildlife. You can also really incorporate the human world into your photos to get an interesting image or tell an interesting story. I really like the way this fence sloped with this short-eared owl perched on it on the left-hand side. And this photo of this painted turtle crossing the road ended up being used in a provincial government campaign and by an organization trying to educate folks about roadside collisions and wildlife. So you can really actually tell a cool story and juxtapose our human world with our wild subjects. And the opportunities are everywhere. I was talking about that OM5, and this was actually taken with a 12 to 45 millimeter lens. This was on vacation in Rome, and there was a pigeon bathing in the drinking fountain, which I think really just illustrates these magic moments are happening all around us. Sometimes we're just not looking for them, but once you start looking for them, you can't unsee them. And it doesn't have to be complicated. This is something you can do, like during your lunch break at the office, you can wander around, or when you're having your cup of coffee, on your deck in the morning and just have your camera there and like see what birds are around that day. And you'll be surprised how much you can find. So I always like to challenge myself if I'm, not going anywhere or if I'm in a little bit of a creative rut. I'll pick sort of one of the locals or regulars in my neighborhood. In Toronto, it was a lot of squirrels and mallards. And I'll challenge myself to try to take a spectacular photo. Right now it's gulls. I want to get a spectacular photo of a gull. So think about, who that is in your neighborhood. Think about who that is and challenge yourself to get a really awesome photo of them.
Cari, I got to jump in too, because it is a fantastic photo. It's one of my personal favorites because we're always glorifying like the big animals, right? You've managed to give a really unique portrait with a lot of character and texture to a fairly common and often overlooked animal that's always around, especially in metro areas, which is awesome. But for those of you, looking at wildlife, the OM5 Mark II, great cameras to take out because they are super lightweight, extremely weather sealed, very compact, but they can handle a lot of wildlife situations, as long as you're not looking for, like the bird AI, autofocus tracking, you still have really tenacious capability with that camera. So if you're looking to have something casual or maybe a backup for travel and you're not sure, maybe there's some landscape, it's a great model to consider. But okay, selfish plug over. Please continue.
I'm distracted by the city chicken. I think that is the perfect name. Okay, next, I want to talk about sort of finding our shot within the scene. And this takes a little bit of practice and a little bit of time. But I really like to think about the difference from documenting a scenario, a subject, to actually creating an image with some intention. I think about the documenting like if I opened my grade 8 biology book and there was a photo of a deer and it was probably in focus and there's a Latin name for deer underneath it and everyone would agree, yep, there's a deer. That's how I sort of think about the documenting piece. The sort of next step we want to do is how do we actually create an image and sort of create that feeling that it evoked in the moment. So for an example, I live in a place where there's a ton of bald eagles. I'm really lucky. In certain times of year, certain seasons, they tend to congregate around food sources. So I see a lot of them. I have a lot of photos like this one. This is a juvenile bald eagle where it's perched on a tree. I'm shooting up. Oftentimes it's, not the prettiest sky in the background. And there's nothing wrong with this image. But when we think about moving from that documenting, I think you would all agree this is in fact a bald eagle, to creating, we really sort of scan the scene around the eagle to try to figure out how we want to find that shot, how we want to tell that story. And the question I try to ask myself over and over again is what makes this photo interesting? And I ask myself that several times in the same encounter because things are always changing, our subjects, our conditions, our light. And what makes it interesting to me might be entirely different than what makes it interesting to you. For me, it was the vastness of this valley that this wolf was crossing through that I found interesting, and that's sort of how I decided to create this shot. Another example is black bears. I spent the spring on Vancouver Island. There's a very dense population of black bears there. They're a little bit different than the mainland bears. They tend to be a little bit bigger because they have such rich food sources. And they also tend to be really dark. There's not a lot of different color morphs. The mask on their face tends to be very black. So I have a lot of photos like this where black bears would come down to the tide line to forage at low tide. And again, nothing wrong with that. But after a while, I started to ask myself, how can I make this photo more interesting? This is that same morning. This black bear was sort of foraging in the tree line, slowly coming down towards the tide. I had watched them enough that I could sort of anticipate that it might do that. And I really liked the reflection on the water. I loved sort of the blacks and grays of this image, and then how this almost alien looking green algae really made the scene pop. So because even subconsciously I had scanned my scene before, when this bear did come down to the waterline, I wasn't zooming right in like I did in the image on the left. I had sort of thought about my scene and how I might want to capture it once that bear did that. Here's an example for you. So this is in a national park in Canada. These bighorn sheep come to the road in the spring to like salt off of the road. They're very, very used to people, and you can't see this, but this is a very, very quiet road. I have really good visibility on all sides. So think about how you might want to capture and create this image. I have now documented there are sheep on the road. One option I have is you see those grassy patches along the side. There was some grazing there. So I can zoom right in. I can try to create this intimate image and try to almost cut that road, well, entirely cut that road out because I want it to feel a little bit more wild. Or another option is I actually incorporate the road. And again, I'm not advocating for anybody to sit in the middle of the road. I was being very safe when I did this. Please be safe out there. But that is just a way to think about how you might want to create your scene and what elements you want to pull in and which ones you don't.
Just to jump in real quick, we got a good question from the comments. So, we noticed a lot of OM1 Mark II, OM5 shots. Of course, those are the cameras you have, and those are often what are, usually looked at for wildlife. Marketing has a job in that, but, that's part of what they're intended for. That said, the OM3, I see a lot of wildlife photographers utilizing it as a backup. A couple of our ambassadors, including Emily Talpin, come to mind. It's a great camera. The consideration with that one is, it's got a lot of the same features and benefits of the OM1 Mark II. It's an absolutely snazzy body, if I say so myself. It's my everyday carry for street photography. But because it doesn't have that grip that the OM1 Mark II has, and even the OM5, you're going to find yourself wanting something to balance the weight of even like a 100 to 400. There are $30 grips that you can grab all over the internet. I'm sure people will even give some recommendations for an external grip to change how that feels. But if that's the camera that makes the right, sense for you, there's no reason to not consider it. So just to address that, if anyone else is curious.
Well said. Okay, from here, we've scanned our scene. We're finding magic everywhere, even in our own backyards. Next, I really try to think about when I actually press the shutter, or in the age of digital cameras, even if you're trigger happy, what moment are you actually going to focus on? What photo are you going to edit? What are you going to share? So I think there's a bit of a difference between getting a shot, and again, that kind of goes back to that documenting, to actually choosing the shot. And we all know being a wildlife photographer is not easy. It's not like we are working in a studio where we get to control the light and the background, and we get to communicate with our subjects and tell them what to wear and how to pose for us and redo something if we messed up our settings the first time. There's so many challenges, and I don't have to tell you, even finding our subjects is difficult. We have such a lack of control over their behaviors, about the conditions, the weather, the environment. Moments can happen really quickly. We don't get a lot of do-overs. There's always challenges in terms of movement, distance, low light, the amount of patience it requires. I'm sure I don't have to tell you, you all know this. All of those pieces that make it so challenging, I think, is also what draws us to this genre, because every moment is so fleeting and is so special. And then the more time we spend out in the field and the more research we do, the more we can actually sort of anticipate some of the behaviors we might see. The better we become at anticipating some of the behaviors, the more likely we are to set ourselves up for the shot we want. Wildlife will always surprise us, but at least we can give ourselves a little bit of an edge that way. So just one example is sort of knowing the seasonal behaviors of the wildlife in your area. Here in BC, we have a salmon run that's actually starting up right now for the fall. So I can know that there's going to be salmon in freshwater streams. I know that's going to draw in predators. I can scope out some of those streams in advance. I can start thinking about the type of shot I want. And that's just one thing we can do as photographers to try to get an extra tool in our toolbox. But the moment we press the shutter, I think sometimes we think it has to be this big explosive moment of action, but it doesn't always have to be the biggest or most obvious moment. It can also be about something much more subtle. It can be about connection with an eye contact with your subject. It can be about stillness. It could be an expression. It could be a little detail on its face or on its body. It could be the anticipation of a moment. So I think that's also just something to think about as you're sort of watching scenes unfold in front of you. Sometimes it's a matter of waiting for sort of a split second behavior when everything lines up, like with this juvenile bald eagle on the right-hand side. I was watching it at sunrise. It was just me and this eagle on this beach, and it was sort of picking at different things on the beach and eventually got to this carcass. And I just waited for that moment when it actually picked up this bird's wing. And that was sort of my split moment of like, yes, that's the moment I want to capture here. Same thing with that river otter. It was coming in from the shore. It was running around. This fish was swinging all over the place and kind of blocking its face. But there was one moment it stood still. You can see its face and you can tell it has a fish in its mouth. Again, my moment might be different from yours, but that's just how I want you to start thinking about it. But again, it can also be about something much more subtle. I really love this goose and its wonky feathers on the left-hand side. And it was sort of, it had its beak tucked into its feathers. It was kind of drifting off to sleep. But every time another goose made a noise, it would just like open its eye a little bit. And that moment where that eye opened a little bit was a moment of connection that pulled me in. And sometimes it's connection between us and the subject. Oftentimes with eye contact, you can feel this, but sometimes it's a connection between the subjects themselves. You can tell in the fox photo who the troublemaker in that sibling group is. Or even with this harbor seal, it was doing a very dramatic yawn. And, you know, you see a little bit of familiarity in its expression, and I think mine sometimes when I'm feeling a little bit dramatic. So finding that connection point can really help strengthen an image.
Hey, Cari, we had a question. It comes up inevitably in every conversation, especially with wildlife or fast action. Someone will always ask, "Did you use Pro Capture in that moment?" I'm sure you probably did, or one of the very similar ones. Any comments on that?
Absolutely. And Pro Capture is some magic witchcraft that I had never experienced before my own 1 Mark II. But yes, especially in the moments where you can anticipate action, like with a bird about to take flight, for example. Also, I do a lot of shore-based whale and orca photography. I love that moment when the fin breaks and the breath, you see that burst of breath. That is really difficult to do when you don't know where your subject is going to appear. So
yeah,
Pro
that's a
Capture
great example.
has really helped me in moments like that. If you haven't tried it and your camera is capable, by all means, go wild. You're going to get some really cool shots.
Absolutely.
It's like time travel. Okay, from here, we are scanning our scene. We are choosing our moment. We are finding, the extraordinary moments, even in ordinary subjects. The next thing I want you to think about is your angle. This made such a big difference for me as I was getting, better and better at wildlife photography. If there's any millennials in the crowd, if you remember Chris's epic hit Get Low,
that's okay, it's not just me. Was I going to out myself for that? Oh man, that was funny. I just heard it, but yeah, Get Low, people.
You can hear Luda in your head right now. So getting eye level, you'll hear so many people talk about this, and there is a reason they do. Once you're eye level with your subject, it really makes the viewer feel like not only are they right there with you, thank you to everyone singing along in the chat, but that you're in that world with your subject now. Oftentimes we tend to sort of shoot down. That takes you out of the moment a little bit. So it creates this real moment of intimacy, of like intense connection when we can try to get eye level with our subjects. Now, this is not always possible. I'm not telling you to do this. There can be safety issues, mobility issues. Sometimes we're shooting from a car. Sometimes we just can't do this. I'm not telling you to always do it, but I'm telling you when you can. If you have an opportunity, try to get a little bit lower and see what an instant difference that is going to make to your image. Sometimes
Absolutely.
I am in like a half sit-up position. I am lying flat on the ground, doing what I've got to do to try to get eye level with my subject.
Do your stretches, people. We've all
Yes,
been there where
exactly.
we've had a great day of shooting, and the next day, it's like, why am I sore? Oh, right, because I was doing that. But yeah,
It's
you
for
bring up a
nothing
really
else.
great point I want to just touch on for a sec. For those of you that might not be too familiar with one of the values here at OM System, ethical wildlife photography, that also means if you're trying to get a perspective of your subject, but that means maybe you're going to go off trail, or you're going to do something unsafe, or you're going to put yourself in a situation that is going to be disruptive to that animal's behavior. Don't, just enjoy the moment. Be safe, be smart, be a good example, right? But
Perfectly said.
just to always want to touch on those points for everybody.
Thank you. So important. Yes, be safe, be respectful first, and then think about ludicrous.
Right.
Okay, just to give you an example of this, I was watching this grizzly bear on coastal BC. She was approaching this water line. I am sort of level to the water. I could have definitely done a better job with this shot, but you can see I'm shooting up at her, and I just want you to get a sense of what a difference it makes once I'm eye level with her. You can see in these other two photos, you're instantly in that moment, you are connected to that bear in a different way. Her name was Lillian. The guide knew her name. So you're instantly in Lillian's world as soon as you are sort of eye level. And it's just a way to give you an example of how that can change your shot instantly. I think so many composition and photography rules are sort of meant to guide us, meant to be pushed a little, and sometimes meant to be broken. One that I think is rarely meant to be broken, although I'm sure someone more creative than me here can prove me wrong, is we really want to focus on the eyes in almost all scenarios. Our human minds will instantly go, whether we're looking at a portrait of a human or an animal, we're instantly going to look at the eyes. If the eyes are out of focus, everything suddenly feels off and uncomfortable to us. It doesn't matter if your subject's looking right at you, if it's staring off into the distance, try to get those eyes in focus. That is sort of the one big takeaway here. And again, if you can prove me wrong and get an awesome creative shot where you haven't done this, please send it my way. I want to see it. Beyond the eyes, some other charismatic features that we are often drawn to are things like ears, paws, antlers, a distinct body shape, tails sometimes. So those are some other things you can think about capturing as well. Okay, now we've thought about all of this, but we have to think about our background. This is another one that really took my photography, I think, from more of sort of the beginner stages into getting the types of shots I was feeling more proud of and more happy about. So we have to think about our backgrounds. You'll often hear photographers talking about subject isolation. That is just, we are often photographing subjects who are designed and evolved to camouflage and blend into their environment. That can make it very difficult for us as photographers to have them stand out and clearly be seen by the viewer. So there are a few different ways we can try to isolate our subjects from their environment and think about things like color and texture. If we've got a black raven against a very shadowy foresty background, it is going to pop much less than if that raven is standing against a snowbank. We can think about things like brightness. If we have a really well-lit animal against a dark background, it is instantly going to pop. We can think about our composition, about movement and positioning, so that we're putting our subject somewhere in the frame where it's not competing for attention with a messy or cluttered background. And then two big ones are our depth of field, so we can shoot with a wider aperture, and our distance. This is the biggest thing that can instantly change our photos, and that can sometimes be more within our control, regardless of the gear we're shooting with. Basically, the more space between the animal and their background, the more blur you're going to get. So here's an example. I told you I would show you some not so great photos. This one's probably not going to win any awards anytime soon. This is a short-eared owl hunting in a field in interior BC. You can see it blends in really well with the grassy environment where it's hunting voles. The black wings pop a little bit, but not very much. It's not even looking, so our eye contact is really not happening here either. But it really kind of disappears against its backdrop. Versus if I just sort of reposition my shot a little bit, this I think is the same owl, but there were a couple, so I cannot guarantee it, but it's the same day, same moment. Wow. You can see how instantly this owl is now popping from its background. Instantly, the viewer can clearly see that is an owl. So that's what I mean by subject isolation, and how sometimes it's just a matter of how we position ourselves and what we look for in the scene. Here's another example. This raven was wandering around a parking lot. I'm sure it was hoping somebody would feed it. But you can see in that first shot, I probably could have done something more creative here, but it's walking against that tire. That tire is a little bit distracting versus me just repositioning myself, the raven moving a little bit, and now it's against a snowbank and boom, like that raven stands out a lot more in that shot. Another thing I want to talk to you about is something called the subject to backdrop ratio. You'll often hear photographers talking about. And if you hear the word ratio and you're scared that I'm going to talk about math, I promise I'm not. I'm not qualified for that. But basically, this is really simple. It's a matter of thinking about how close we are to our subject, and especially thinking about how far the subject is from its background. The further the subject is from its background, the more depth we instantly create, the more that subject is going to pop from the background. So again, this was my first time photographing quail. They are such weird, chaotic little birds, but you can see in this shot, I tried to focus on that guy in the middle. It's not looking up, I'm not getting low. There's a lot of things I am not doing right in this moment, but you can see the camera is trying to focus on the quail, and also all the grass that's sort of at that same distance is now also in focus. So Mr. Quail in the middle really doesn't pop from this scene. What I did is I waited for them to come a little bit closer. I waited for my moment a little bit. I got a little bit lower, and you can see how instantly this is an entirely different photo. Now he had moved closer to sort of that blurry foreground you see in the first image. And now this hill behind him is quite a bit further behind him. Instantly, you get a subject that really stands out from the background instead of kind of being lost in it. Another example, these Canada geese are eating blueberries actually in this big open field. You can see I'm kind of shooting down. The field is very vast, so you're already seeing a little bit of blur because of that distance at the top of the image. But you can see that leaf right next to the goose's neck is about the same distance from me as the goose, so that leaf is also in focus. So think about this versus I'm getting lower. Background is further away. I'm waiting for my moment again. And again, instantly the goose is really popping from its background. So this is one really, really critical thing that you'll see as soon as you start doing this, it's going to change your photo. We also really want to think about messy, distracting, cluttered backgrounds. This black bear was at a fish hatchery here in BC. There's little pathways for the salmon to get around this structure, but it sometimes takes them a while to find them. So this smart bear learned if it stands right here, it can just dip its head into the water. It doesn't even have to do anything and pull out a salmon. So bad place to be a salmon, great place to be a bear. So you can see it was sort of under a little bit of shade. It had this really bright light coming from the background through the bars. And it felt zooish to me. Like I did not love this background by any means. So yeah, sometimes there's, yeah, totally. So there's things you can do to kind of work around that. I could wait for the bear to move a little bit and then I can crop that background out entirely. It feels a little bit more wild. I can actually try to use the structure to frame the bear a little bit. Or I can zoom right in. And now your focus is on that poor salmon that is lunch, much less than it is on that background. I'm just looking at the chat.
Yeah, I'm holding on to a couple questions for you. So I mean, we can go over a few, actually. I think this is a good place. So first off, subject detection. Is that something that you're using, or are you just trying to place it on the eye? What are your thoughts?
I am definitely using subject detection. Yes.
Absolutely. I mean, it's an amazing tool.
100%. It has just, again, leveled up and elevated what I am able to do, especially when things are happening so quickly. You know, there's a lot of motion. Moments are very fleeting. It has really given me a leg up.
Yeah. Animal IAF, bird IAF, they're such helpful, crucial tools. I've had people try to suggest, oh, that's cheating. No. Just like any other technology, it's always improving. It's our benefit then to use those tools and then up the bar of excellence. We're able to say yes to more stuff. We're able to show more images like this more consistently so we can advocate on their behalf. There's a lot of benefits to that. But, you know, yeah, if all else fails and for whatever reason you're just really finding that you want to put it manually on the eye, yeah, sure. The OM1 Mark II has a joystick for you to move that focus point around, but subject detection is a fantastic tool. Definitely utilize it. Another one, somebody was asking, what's your default dial setting for just running gun shooting wildlife? Are you a manual, aperture priority, shutter priority? What's your mode for that?
I do want to talk about that a little bit at the end.
Okay.
When I
We're
was
getting
sort
ahead
of
of
getting a little
ourselves.
bit, no, this is a great preview. When I was getting a little bit more comfortable with shooting manual, I went aperture priority for a really long time. That really served me until a point where I eventually wanted more control and realized shutter speed is pretty important with subjects that are moving around so much. But I am a big advocate for starting, whether it's your preference, whether it's aperture or shutter priority, but aperture priority for me was amazing when I was starting out. And eventually I felt confident enough that I could then go full manual. Right now I like the control, so I'm in full manual most of the time.
Yep.
Okay. Sometimes there is very little we can do in our scene. Believe it or not, there is a grizzly in that photo. It is behind a very, very cluttered, you can see foreground. The bear blends in really well to the colors of the scene. It is, I don't think anybody would argue this bear is popping from the scene. You can barely tell it's there. But I was in a car. This is in the fall. The bears are in a state called hyperphagia where they're just eating and eating and eating. I'm absolutely not getting out of that car. I'm not approaching the bear like Ben mentioned earlier. I'm being respectful of the bear space, making safe decisions. So at this point, we go back to sort of scanning our scene. I was able to see that there were a few little breaks in all these very distracting twigs. And every once in a while, the bear would look up and sort of reach its paw up and reach for a branch. So sometimes it's a matter of waiting for that moment. And because we've scanned our scene, we are ready for it. This was a manual focus moment for me because I could not get around all of these branches as the bear was moving. But I was ready when I had that second when it did look up and reach up. So assuming, again, you can do this safely and respectfully, try to move around a little bit and play around with your angles when you're shooting to figure out how you can best isolate that subject from the backdrop. It really doesn't take much sometimes. Sometimes it's a matter of a step to the left, a step to the right, getting down a little bit lower, and all of a sudden your photo looks entirely different. And sometimes it's not instantly obvious where that might be. So kind of look through your viewfinder again every time you shift a little bit just to see what's happening with your scene. Once you start doing this, you'll suddenly notice it does really change the way your photos turn out. Okay, last big thing is I want to talk about light. I think we all know whether we're really paying attention to it or not, light can really change our images. It can make or break our images. These are just some examples where I'd argue they're kind of interesting photos, but if this was taken in the middle of the day with bright blue sky, there probably wouldn't be quite as much interesting about these photos. Light can really transform our images. So I am still working on doing this more and being better at this, but I try to always ask myself, what is the light doing? What direction is it coming from? Is it hard light or soft light? What is it doing to my subject's face? Is it creating cool shadows or really weird shadows? Is it causing the eyes to really sort of sink in and disappear under those shadows? What is it doing to the background? Is there a way I can reposition myself to work with the light in a different way? Can I wait for the light to change? And if all else fails, what can I do with the light I have? And one thing I often hear people talk about is hard and soft light. I think we can get into this binary where we think soft light is good, hard light is bad. And I encourage you not to think about it that way, but it is different. It's basically I like to think about it as how gradually are you going from your brightest point in the image to your darkest, your shadowiest point in the image. And with soft light, like in this otter photo, it's way more forgiving. You get way more even light. You can see the difference between the highlights, the brightest spots, and the shadows. It's not a super sharp contrast. Versus with hard light, it can be very dramatic. And often we think about this as direct midday sun, but this can also happen, at sunrise and sunset if there's nothing obstructing our light. So sometimes we don't have control over what the sun's doing. Sometimes we just have to shoot with what we have. I'm a big advocate for take your moment, take your shot when you get it. You can't control the light. You can always go back and try again at, in different lighting conditions, but you can't get the behavior necessarily to repeat. Yeah, soft light is kind of what you're getting on those overcast days, early mornings, sort of before sunset, if you're in consistent shade or if you're in like cool, foggy or misty conditions. Also try to think about where the light's coming from. I think a lot of times, even when we're taking photos for family reunions or whatever, we think about front light. Everyone always says, make sure the sun's behind you. And that is great for getting detail, great for getting a more sort of even exposure. Sometimes can fall a little bit flat, but that is sort of, there's a reason that, you know, we go for that when we're taking those family portraits at the reunions. You can also experiment with backlight when the light source is behind your subject. And this can create really cool rim lighting. It can create a little bit of a glow on things like feathers and ears. So it can really make shapes stand out with silhouettes. So definitely worth experimenting with. Side light can be really beautiful in creating shadows and depth and texture to your image. Like with this bear, the light was coming from one side, the rest of its face is in the shadows. And top light, when the light is directly above us, can be challenging. It has a lot of contrast. But again, that was what was happening when I saw this wolf. I took that shot because I didn't know when I was going to see a wolf again. So really make do with what you have. And I wouldn't count a shot out just because the light isn't what you dreamed it would be. And lastly, I just want to talk about catch light. That's when you get that little glimmer in your subject's eyes that instantly adds some life to it and something really interesting to the shot. And it's not a setting skill. It's not a technical skill. This is a positioning and composition skill. You don't need the animal to be looking directly at the light source, but when it lifts its head and it catches that light, that is sort of one of your moments that you might want to consider capturing. So it basically requires you to know where the light source is. And in this case, I was watching this raccoon climbing up this shady tree. I saw the ray beam coming through the branches and waited for that moment when the light was caught in its eye. Lastly, I live in a place where the weather does all sorts of dramatic things. Don't write off bad weather. Again, be safe. That is the first and foremost thing I want you to take away. But some of the most dramatic moments and dramatic and interesting shots happen when weather conditions are not ideal. Also, often see a lot of activity right before a big storm, right after a big storm. So again, assuming you can do so safely, don't write off the rainy days or the snowy days. You can find some really, really cool things out there. Okay, last big thing I want to cover is just sort of my transition from shooting in more auto modes, and we've already touched on this a little bit, to shooting in manual, and just some in-between steps that I took that helped me. You might be anywhere along this journey, you may be well beyond it, but take any of this if it serves you. First thing, shooting in RAW is something I didn't know to do for the first little while, embarrassingly, when I started taking photos, until I saw another photographer talk about it. And I was like, what does that mean?
It's a subject of great. I'm a shoot it in RAW, always have a backup that won't degrade over time. JPEG is instant gratification with a little bit of tweak. That's my take. I had to jump in. The comments might start blowing up if we don't.
Yeah, give us your take.
Go ahead. About that.
But especially if you are going to spend time editing your photos, RAW gives you so much more control over doing that. So think about starting to do that if that is something that speaks to you. In my shift from manual, we already talked about this. I started with aperture priority. If that exposure triangle is a lot for you to think about right now, that is a really good way to start getting comfortable with shooting a little bit more manual without having to be in charge of all three. And also try shooting wide open, like we were talking about subject isolation before, to get that depth and see how you like it. Maybe it's not going to work for every context, but give it a shot, see how that feels. From there, I moved to manual with auto ISO. And I think I saw somebody mention this in the chat. That gave me two things to think about, because again, very quickly, shutter speed starts becoming important when you're working with moving subjects or perched subjects or subjects that are going from still to motion. So that gives you two things, but not all three to think about. And then once you get comfortable there, it's sort of a tiered approach. Then you go full manual. And sometimes if I just want to be ready, I still have auto ISO on, just so that I can be ready for that moment if if something happens that I wasn't expecting. Lastly, when we're playing around with shutter speed, people are probably going to disagree with me here, but just as general rules, if there's very, very little motion in the scene, I usually start at around 1/500. I can bump that down. If there's a little bit of motion, I usually like to be at 1/1000. If there's fast action, I'm quickly bumping that up to 1/2000. And if it's utter chaos, I'm 1/3200 or above, are just sort of my general spaces where I'm comfortable starting. Okay, lastly, Ben already touched on this, and I appreciate you so much for doing that. But I think anytime we're all together as wildlife photographers, we do ourselves a disservice if we don't talk about the ethics behind our craft, because we're all in it because we love wildlife. So to me, ethical wildlife photography means I put the well-being of the animal above the shot always, if it comes down to it. Sometimes this means being really respectful of space, making sure we're not doing anything that causes a lot of stress or habituation, and just trying to minimize our impact on the environment and on our subject as much as we can. So some things to keep in mind are we don't bait or feed wildlife. We're keeping that safe and respectful distance. They're going to know we're there, but we try to minimize our impact as much as we can in terms of how we're moving, how long we're staying, the type of gear we're using. We also are going to try to know our subjects well enough to notice when we see signs of stress or discomfort, especially early on. And I like to say, if the subject gets to decide when the encounter is over. If I am watching an owl perched for a while and all of a sudden, a big group comes up behind me and that owl is now spooked and takes off, that is not my cue to go pursue that owl into the forest. I say, thank you very much, owl. I had a great time with you, and you go do your thing now. So yeah, those are just a couple of things I like to keep in mind. And one other thing, especially in the age of social media, is just be mindful of sharing specific locations publicly. That can very quickly get out of hand, especially with sensitive species, with nesting animals, with denning animals. It's a very different story if someone you trust reaches out and asks you versus if you're now broadcasting that for the whole internet to see. And then because you're all my friends now, I want you to be safe out there. So just always keep safety top of mind, especially, in the genre of photography we're in. Do your research, know what's happening with conditions, how quickly they can change, know the location you're going to, understand your subjects a little bit, and avoid going alone if you can. If you are going alone or even with somebody else, make sure you tell somebody where you're going and when to expect you back. Think about satellite communication, especially if you're out in backcountry in case of an emergency, and make sure you have the right gear on you. So your clothes are going to keep you warm and dry. You got your bear spray if you're out in bear country. You've got first aid, communication device, all of that. I want you to be safe out there. I did promise you homework, and we are at that part of the presentation. Some things I want you to think about trying is try treating your next outing in your neighborhood like a little bit of an expedition. Bring your camera. It can be simple. It can be easy. It could be on your way to work, and just see what you can find out there, because once you start paying attention, you're actually going to start to notice so much cool stuff out there. Do that thing I sometimes do where you pick a subject that you see often. I would love to know what that is for you, and challenge yourself to get a spectacular shot of one of your locals. Try using the environment to tell a bigger story. Try getting a little bit lower than you normally would and see what happens. And try playing around with that catch light on the animal's eye the next time it looks at a light source. And I love when people send me their photos. So if you ever want to share them with me, please do. You can, if you want, you can drop your handle in the chat and I will find you, or reach out to me on Instagram every time. I love nothing more than when people tell me about their encounters and the photos that they get. And that is it from me, folks. Thank you so much.
If it translated over audio well, I'd clap. Wow. Okay. My gosh. Amazing amounts of positive feedback. That makes my heart feel good. And I know that feels good for you too. Such enthusiasm. And we've got a bunch of questions that I want to talk through. Before I jump into questions, make sure that you definitely give Cari a follow. Her Instagram is in the description. You can also explore a whole bunch of the bodies and lenses that are appropriate for wildlife on our website. That's also in the description. So make sure to check those out. But the other things, if you want to know more like these, make sure that you're following, get post notifications. Also sign up for our emails. You will get notified when shows are upcoming. Our next one is exactly a week from today, and that's going to be with Ben Salb. Many of you know him as a North American macro insect photographer, but he took the OM3 to Japan recently. So we're going to talk about that unique experience. So if you want to see more of these and get inspired regularly and participate, make sure that you're following us. So selfish plug over. I want to dive into some great questions. First off, before I do that, the big takeaways that I saw from this overall, let me just remove that slide. Cool. So the big takeaways, be patient. Of course, we can never say that enough. Framing to isolate our subjects instead of just shooting the moment. We kind of settle that excitement a little bit and really think with more intentionality, right? That's what so many of your images are doing. It's like, oh, wow, that's really pretty. And then you see the final example. It's like, oh, wow. We should really respect that pigeon, right? It gives that emotion, it gives gravitas to your subject. That's not something everybody can do. We see a lot of cute photos. Yours make us feel something, but that's why, right? You're giving intentionality to the subject. Targeting eyes, of course, we naturally look to the eyes as our subject. If you can get a catch light by paying attention to where that light is coming from, even better, it gives a sense of life. It's that thing that most people can't identify, but when we show them a side-by-side, if there's a catch light in your subject's eye, it's great. That's all about your angles and paying attention to where that light is coming from. Keep moving. Don't grow roots. We've seen it plenty of times. Of course, if it's the only place to be because it's safe or ethical, of course, that's fine. But keep moving if you can. You'll get a much more interesting image that way, and you'll have a lot more fun. And then the last thing is pay attention to bad weather. Bad weather equals good images. You get unique behaviors. You get an interesting photo that no one else gets. And you get to show a behavioral aspect of that animal that other photographers will be like, wow, they went out during that snowstorm. I'm kind of, okay, I'm inspired to go out next time. So think of it that way too. You know, you're encouraging others to do that. All right, so let's take a look at some of our questions. So I hope you're ready for a lightning round with some of these.
Yeah. Let's go.
Yeah. So can you tell us which target size you use for wildlife in motion and which autofocus mode you use and why? I think we kind of answered this as far as the autofocus mode that you use, but do you change your subject detection size or do you just let the different animal detection modes take over?
If I have time, I will change it. But if it's a quick moment, I let them take over and they do very well for me. So yeah, if there's time, and sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't, then by all means. But otherwise, I trust subject detection.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, take this with a grain of salt. A lot of photography, guys, it's like cooking. You know, you'll figure out what is right for you, what works for me, what works for Cari. That might not be what really jives with you in the field. Right? Because
my recipe might be different.
Energy. Yeah. I mean, personally, if I'm dealing with small erratic subjects, you know, like smaller birds, especially when they're up in the trees, or if you know, we're photographing warblers, they love those deep brambly areas. It's almost like they're kind of thumbing their nose at the photographer to say, like, come on, see if you can get me. I'm going to keep bouncing around. I will go to bird detection, but I will go to it with a smaller point, just so I can be more intentional about where it's grabbing from instead of it looking everywhere. If it is a lower light situation, your camera utilizes both contrast and phase detect. Essentially, it's two different types of focus technology. Contrast is slow, but it's a little bit more accurate in low light. If you're dealing with low light and you're having a problem there, do that, or do the cheat code of mirrorless, which is use focus peaking, which is a setting in your camera. All mirrorless cameras have them today. And you can do autofocus and manual focus. So you could tweak it and you'll see in color what's in focus and what's not. It's great for videographers too. So that's that. I'm sure we could get a lot of different opinions on this, but 100 to 400 or 150 to 600 for Alaska wildlife? More reach good all the time? Maybe, maybe not.
Yeah, I think this really depends. For me, the 150 to 400 has been a really, really good range and reach for most situations, but it also depends on your subject, how close they might be getting to you, how comfortable they are with you, that whether you want an environmental shot or, you know, that really, really close crop. So I'm sorry if this is a cop out, but I think it really depends.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing, the 150 to 600, it does give tremendous reach. It's also our heaviest lens, so it is something to consider. Granted, if you compare it to most full frame options, it's about what you'd be experiencing anyway. The 100 to 400 is an excellent lens as far as compactness and weight, but if you're not sure, either your bag or your personal willingness to deal with the weight or size will kind of dictate that. I like this one. I want to know this too. Do you prefer taking photos of wildlife in urban or more wild settings?
Oh, it's such a tough question. I think the nice thing about the more wild settings is you feel more disconnected from sort of our reality, and I feel much more connected to myself and the world. So I think this setting, obviously, if you're way out in nature, that can't be beat, and we all know that. But I actually think the experience of watching wildlife and the way I get sort of lost and everything else goes quiet in those moments is the same, whether it's, you know, in a coyote in a big city or whether it's, you know, a coyote in, in the remote backcountry. I am so focused on the subject that the impact is really the same for me.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, personally, I love your urban stuff because we don't see a lot of urban wildlife photography that matches the quality of what you do out in the field, and it creates a space for a conversation. You know, we're not alone in these spaces. Some of these animals, like pigeons, have truly evolved to be habituated and optimized for
And thrive, yeah.
a metro area. Yeah, I mean, there's tons of nature shows that talk about it, and then their predators are there, and then their prey is there. It's kind of a fun cycle, so it's cool to see what's going on around you.
And such a story of resilience too.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, there are so many good ones. I just want to keep us on a certain amount of coherence. You've talked about the dial features. You're definitely a fan of manual, but if you're getting started, aperture priority, just to highlight that again for people coming in. Mm-hmm. We do have someone, I don't know that you're going to be able to answer this question, but I know that I can, and I know that I need to send you this lens. It's nice about being an ambassador, you can try out equipment. Sometimes Customs likes to give us a hassle though, so unfortunately, Cari hasn't been able to really play with the 58-200 yet. That's going to be changing in a month. But so the 58-200 with a teleconverter, for those of you that don't know, it can take both our 1.4 and our 2x teleconverter. The benefits of that is you get much more reach while being incredibly small without losing too much light. You're only dropping down to about 5.6 with a 2x teleconverter. The consideration to keep in mind though, and this is just a blanket statement, folks, so take it as you will. Whenever you are introducing new optics, you are changing the sharpness of that lens that you're putting it in front of. That said, I've seen a lot of shots come out of it with the 2x teleconverter. You can check out Peter Baumgarten's work. He's got some tremendous images with that combo. It is surprisingly sharp. The 1.4, even more so. Another benefit is you get the versatility of close focus that the 150 to 400 won't. The other consideration, this is a benefit for both. They're the same sharpness out of the gate. Those lenses, they match each other. The stabilization between both is also tremendous. So that's a fun thing to test out. So if you're looking at both, try to look at your budget more from how much native focal length can I get, and look at that teleconverter as the last piece, because it'll work with a bunch of your lenses too. So that's our official, 10 cents on that piece, but it's a phenomenal lens. This is a good question. I'm curious about this. Let's talk about ISO a little bit. When did you start getting comfortable with higher ISOs?
To me, it really comes down to light. Sometimes it is a really low light situation, and then I would rather sort of do what I can to get the shot, and I'm not afraid to bump up ISO.
Right.
So yeah, it comes down, I think, to light for me mostly. I'll try to keep it as low as I can, but if it's a matter of being able to get the shot or not, I'm not afraid to bump it up. And you'll see even in some of the photos, it is probably higher than you might expect because of some low light conditions. What do you have to add there, Ben?
No, I'm looking at the comments. For me, I think it's, you hit the nail on it perfectly. It's what we need to do to get the exposure. High ISO, I've learned, means something different to everybody. I've had people say 1600 is too high, 8000 is too high. I don't start caring until it's over 10,000. That's different for everybody. What a lot of people tend to forget about is the fact that if you expose properly in the field and it was the right ISO to get a proper exposure, you're probably fine. Where you're going to have noise that you're not going to be a huge fan of is if you have to then increase the exposure after the fact. Because now you've locked it in for one thing and now you need to increase the sensitivity. That's going to be where you start to see that. The other consideration is the ISO performance gets better and better all the time, but also our ability to edit and change it through things like DxO noise, Topaz, Lightroom, of course, all fantastic options that get better and better all the time. If you want to see some extreme examples, keep looking at wildlife work like Cari's. Also, maybe check out some astro images from people like Matt Seuss. He just did a presentation on here a little while ago, but all of his work being astro, it's all high ISO. So big consideration there. Don't be afraid of it. Auto ISO, same consideration. Just keep in mind, be mindful. It's just like Cari was saying, when it comes to the light, be present. We've got some other questions that have to do with focusing. Do you use back button focus?
I don't, and I've been wanting to experiment with that a little bit more. So I might have to find you and talk about this a little bit after. I know a lot of photographers who do and love it. It hasn't been part of my flow yet, but it's something I want to give it a shot.
I mean, it's a great tool. It does take a little bit of a different learning curve. It's really not hard, but the benefits are kind of hard to ignore, especially when you're dealing with subjects that are erratic or they're coming in between objects. Like I would have seen it be really helpful for when that bear was moving in between those
100%.
grays. AI detection is going to do such a great job for you to get you there. You might find a higher keeper rate because now it's not looking for focus and doing it at the same time. You're getting both. So that can be a big benefit, but it does have a little bit of learning curve. I always recommend for people to experiment with it. Some people swear by it.
I'm going to give it a shot. I'll report back.
And then also, this is a good question. So obviously, and I think you're the perfect person to answer this because you make some amazing content. You guys should really check out Cari's Instagram. If you haven't, she makes some fantastic videos. I feel like you're going to say yes, but you know, how does this relate for you?
So video is very new for me. It was really getting the OM1 Mark II when I started experimenting it with a little bit more. And I've really been liking it. I've been enjoying it so much, and you're able to capture the scene a little bit differently. So I'm still very early in my learning stage with video, but I've really, really enjoyed it. And I also just want to give a shout out to Ben as well, who is sort of my go-to guru on all things tech and settings. And I always just love the way you answer some of these questions because I learned so much just being in conversation and hearing you answer them. I'm taking notes over here as well. So thank you, Ben.
Thanks. No, I really appreciate that. It is an honor to support you and the rest of the ambassadors. It's nice to be able to speak your language. I get to nerd out about gear all day, but yeah, I did teach this stuff for a while, but it's really fun to keep sharing it, you know, and it's fun for people to realize, like, yeah, the pros, the ambassadors, they're not necessarily tech wizards. They're putting in the time. They have the artistic eye. They're going to the right places. They're not getting lost in the sauce on the specs, right? They know their tool. That's the big thing to focus on. Understanding what the right tool is or the right starting point for settings is great. But spending time in the field is really where you see the results. So I hope people have that as an inspiring takeaway.
And don't be afraid to make mistakes along the way, because that's really where you learn, and that is where the growth happens as well. It's easy to see like somebody posts all of their beautiful photos on Instagram and think that's all that's on their memory card, and I can promise you it is not. There are a lot of missed settings there too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's not film, people. Keep shooting, keep experimenting. If you approach your stuff from a place of curiosity and wonder, that'll translate in your photos and you'll have a lot more fun. Even if it wasn't a perfect day, it's still better than something else you could be doing, right? This is a good one. It's a little long, so I'm going to read it out to you. So when you're looking at your subject, going back to that earlier photo, I think it's the raccoon that we were looking at with the that really tight eye isolation that was in the slides. You know, you've got that really soft blurred foreground, you know, to help keep that as a technique. Is that something that you're finding is a part of your technique, or is that something that just works for that moment?
It comes down to the moment, I think, a lot, as with everything, but it is something I look for. If there's a way to create that really like blurry magic foreground, if there's a leaf, or even if you want to sort of hold something up to create it, it can really create a cool element. So thank you for noticing that. I actually thought about including it in that section, and then I thought I have talked enough at you. So I didn't, but I absolutely do think about the foreground and think about how we can use that to isolate our subjects further.
Fantastic. Well, I think that's all the questions that we had. So I really appreciate all of the lively discussion. You guys can ask more questions in the comments. If you're watching this later, leave them in the comments. We will be there to answer those. You can DM us on Instagram. You can DM Cari directly as well. I'm sure she'd love to talk to some of you. But again, keep shooting, print your images, be a good advocate for ethical wildlife photography. Be patient, keep experimenting, don't get stuck, pay attention to what's going on around you. The results will come. So, Cari, thanks for showing us how to take our good images to great. And we will see everybody next time.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Take care, guys. Let's roll that outro. I'm going to do it really fast this time. I'm not going to look around for it like all the time. There we go. Bye, people.